Even as a kid getting into mountain bikes for the first time, NS bikes always felt special. Sure, they had big-name riders winning big-name contests, but they still weren't the brand your rich neighbor or washed-up uncle rode. NS was different. They felt more core. Fast forward to today, and even despite some bumps along the way, they've managed to stay true to that rider-first, anti-establishment mentality that they're rooted in. So grab a drink, maybe some popcorn, and get ready to hear one of the most unlikely success stories the cycling industry's ever seen. In order to truly understand the story of NS bikes, we have to start with its founder, Szymon Kobylinski. Kobylinski's love of bikes started at an early age, but it would be punk rock that first made him famous, at least in Poland. Long before NS was a thought on anybody's mind, he was the frontman of one of Poland's biggest rock bands of the 90s, Blenders. They released multiple albums that went gold and toured relentlessly, playing over 700 live shows that decade. But even with that busy schedule, Kobylinski's love affair with bicycles burned on, and he was known to sometimes skip out on the tour bus, instead ride his bike from show to show. But what's even crazier is that despite all that chaos going on around him, Szymon somehow also managed to become a pretty dang successful downhill racer as well, winning several Polish national races. Essentially, Kobylinski was living every teenage boy's dream, but there was one slight problem. You see, at the time, it was pretty hard to get gravity-oriented bikes and components in Poland, meaning if you broke a frame or a wheel in a race, you could be benched for weeks before you got your replacement. Now, for some, that might have seemed like an insurmountable obstacle, but Kobylinski saw it as an opportunity. What if he was the guy to source and distribute this much-needed equipment throughout Poland? This led to what he and his wife Anna call the scariest day of their lives, and that was making the decision to start their own distribution company, 7 Anna. They opened up shop in 2000 and grew quickly, going on to carry some of the biggest brands in the industry, including Crank Brothers, Banshee, E13, and more. But as it turns out, that would just be the start. Kobylinski realized that he could make 7 Anna even more successful if he sold his own branded components. And North Shore Extreme was born. Szymon would source generic bars, stems, and pedals from Taiwan, slap on his logo, and just like that, the middleman was cut out. Now, rebranding OEM off-the-shelf components is one thing, but that's still a far cry from the dirt jump brand I fell in love with in the 2000s. Thus begins part 2 of our story, when North Shore Extreme rebrands to NS Bikes in 2004. That first year, they also signed their first athletes and, more importantly, released their first frame, the Street Legal. This has got to be one of the wildest frames to come out during this period. Built fully from steel, the Street Legal was a free-ride hardtail weighing in at a staggering 9 pounds or 4 kilograms. It was more or less universally compatible as well, with NS bragging that it could handle 24-inch wheels, 26-inch wheels, mountain bike hub standards, BMX hub standards, and get this, even peg compatibility. Now, while the Street Legal did a great job of creating a lot of buzz about this new Polish brand, didn't exactly sell by the crate load. That's why, in 2006, NS decided to release the Suburban, a proper dedicated dirt jump frame. This frame, with its BMX-inspired geometry and tubing, became an instant classic, and more or less shaped dirt jumper design from there on out. The Suburban has of course gone through many iterations since its original 2006 debut, but the Suburban does still remain in NS's lineup, and it's their best-selling frame of all time. Quick little plug here, we actually sell this frame over on BikesOnline.com. I've left a link in the description where you can get a killer deal on it if you're interested. Around the same time that the Suburban came out was also when NS signed their first rider that really made it big, Martin Söderström. Though at the time, he was a relatively unknown Swedish rider. Söderström would go on to become one of the most decorated freeriders of the era, competing in multiple Red Bull Joyrides, X Games, and even Red Bull Rampage. He also played a large role in launching the brand's next-gen dirt jump frame, the Majesty. By 2010, just 10 years after Szymon's scary decision to enter the bike industry, NS Bikes had already proven itself as one of Europe's most successful bike manufacturers. They sold several well-respected dirt jump and hardtail frames, a wide range of popular components, and sponsored some of the best slopestyle riders in the world. At this point, most of us would be happy to just sit on our laurels and ride into retirement. But not our rock star turned downhill racer turned bike industry business guru. In fact, Szymon Kobylinski was just getting started. In 2011, NS dropped the Soda, their first full suspension bike. This is around the same time that my love affair with NS bikes was getting started, and boy did I dream about the Soda. It was available as both a short travel slopestyle model and a long travel freeride bike, and to this day I think it's one of the best looking bikes of the era. 2011 was also when NS signed Sam Pilgrim, and that pairing, Sam and NS, would go on to be one of the most recognizable duos in all of freeride mountain biking history. Sam won dozens of huge events aboard his NS bikes, including the FMB World Tour in 2013. 2013, as it turns out, would go on to be a pretty big year for NS. Not only did Pilgrim win the biggest slopestyle award, NS would also release their biggest bike to date, the Fuzz. The Fuzz was, and still is, a dedicated dual crown downhill bike. NS would go on to be the title sponsor in elite UCI downhill racing for 10 years. And while they never had quite the same success between the tape as they did on the slopestyle course, just competing at that level is still a pretty big accomplishment. 2 years later, NS rounded out their lineup with the Snap, a full suspension trail bike that also just happened to be their first carbon bike as well. But despite successfully diversifying themselves into other disciplines of cycling, NS never lost sight of their roots, dirt jumping. And that was brought front and center when they signed David and Szymon Kobylinski, who together earned NS several FMB and X Games medals. Today, NS carries the proud title of having more podiums in international slopestyle events than any other brand. By 2020, NS was at the top of the game. Not only were they sponsoring some of the top freeriders in the world, they were also beginning to become a household name through their popular trail, downhill, and, for the first time that year, XC bikes. In order to further capitalize on that success, Kobylinski had to make a difficult decision that a lot of business owners have to make at some point during their career, and that's whether or not to sell off their brand. Kobylinski did in fact do this in 2020, selling a majority of ownership of 7ANA, again that's the parent company of NS that he started 20 years prior, to a Polish private equity firm. The idea was that this would free up capital for them to expand into the newly emerging scene of e-bikes. Pandemic bike sales kept business booming, and in 2022, they did just that, launching the E-Find. But like just about every brand in the cycling industry around this time, 7ANA and NS were about to be taken on a wild ride. As we all know now, that COVID-era cycling boom didn't last, and in 2023, NS's biggest supplier, Wiggle CRC, filed for bankruptcy, eventually shut down. As if to add insult to injury, one of NS's largest suppliers also filed for bankruptcy around the same time, meaning they had no bikes coming in or out. And that's pretty bleak. But as I'm sure you can guess by now, our beloved Polish rock star didn't throw in the towel. Instead, unhappy with how his brand was being managed by this new equity firm, he decided to buy back 100% of 7ANA, which he did in May of 2025. Now, given NS's storied history and promising future, it didn't take long for another investor to come on board. And in October of 2025, 7ANA and all of its accompanying brands, including NS, were sold to Polish manufacturer Storm. Even with the acquisition though, Kobylinski remains at the helm of the brands he's been nurturing for over 20 years. Despite the recent financial ups and downs, the future of NS bikes is bright. Szymon Kobylinski built the company from nothing, and he's far from giving up now. Just a few months ago, NS announced the return of the Soda as a long travel freeride bike that's expected to be available later this year. The bike pays homage to its namesake as a no-frills 180mm freeride machine. On top of that, many of NS's iconic models are still in their lineup, and we at BikesOnline carry a lot of them, including the legendary Suburban, the Majesty, and the Capital dirt jump frames. As I've been alluding to in this video, I feel like NS played a pretty formidable role in my coming of age as a mountain biker. And that's despite the fact that I never owned one. And I think that really says a lot about the brand and their commitment to making rad bikes for real riders. They didn't start in a corporate boardroom. NS was literally the brainchild of a punk rocker turned downhill racer. And I think that tells you just about everything you need to know about the company. If that's the kind of authenticity you're looking for from a bike manufacturer, then I think you'll feel right at home on an NS. And again, we at BikesOnline carry a lot of them, and I've left a link down in the description where you can shop our entire collection. Now, if you've ridden an NS bike, I'd love to hear your experience on that, and you can leave that in the comments as well. After you've done that, grab your bike, whatever it is, get out there, and get ripping.